News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhishthira's worldly possessions, the sacrifices by which he would attain a better destination, his queen, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, his fame, etc. Only a rich and great man's name and fame are known all over the world, and the name and fame of Maharaj Yudhishthira reached the higher planets because of his good administration, worldly possessions, glorious wife, Draupadi, the strength of his brothers, Bhima and Arjuna, and his solid sovereign power over the world, known as Jambudvip. Here the word loka is significant. There are different lokas or higher planets scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. A person can reach them by dint of his work in the present life, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:25. No forceful entrance is allowed there. Tiny material scientists and engineers who have discovered vehicles to travel over a few thousand miles in outer space will not be allowed entrance. That is not the way to reach the better planets. One must qualify himself to enter into such happy planets by sacrifice and service. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:19. Maharaj Yudhishthira's good sacrifices and qualifications were so lofty and virtuous that even the residents of the higher celestial planets were already prepared to receive him as one of them. 6. O Brahmanas, O opulences of the king, the opulence of the king was so enchanting that the denizens of heaven aspired for it. But because he was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service. There are two things in the world which can satisfy living beings. When one is materially engrossed, he is satisfied only by sense gratification. But when one is liberated from the conditions of the material modes, he is satisfied only by rendering loving service for the satisfaction of the Lord. This means that the living being is constitutionally a servitor, and not one who is served. Being illusioned by the conditions of the energy, one falsely thinks himself to be served, but actually he is not served. He is servant of the senses, like lust, desire, anger, avarice, pride, madness, and intolerance. When one is in his prayer, in his proper senses, by attainment of spiritual knowledge, he realizes that he is not the master of the material world, but is only a servant of the senses. At that time, he begs for the service of the Lord, and thus becomes happy without being illusioned by so-called material happiness. Maharaj Yudhishthira was one of the liberated souls, and therefore for him there was no pleasure in a vast kingdom, good wife, obedient brothers, happy subjects, and prosperous world. These blessings automatically follow for a pure devotee, even though the devotee does not aspire for them. The example set herein is exactly suitable. It is said that one who is hungry is never satisfied by anything other than food. The whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The hunger is not for good food, shelter, or sense gratification. The hunger is for the spiritual atmosphere. Due to ignorance only, they think that the world is dissatisfied because there is not sufficient food, shelter, defense, and objects of sense gratification. This is called illusion. When the living being is hungry for spiritual satisfaction, he is misrepresented by material hunger. But the foolish leaders cannot see that even the people who are most sumptuously materially satisfied are still hungry. And what is their hunger and poverty? This hunger is actually for spiritual food, spiritual shelter, spiritual defense, and spiritual sense gratification. These can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit, Lord Sri Krishna. And therefore, one who has them cannot be attracted by the so-called food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification of the material world, even if they are relished by the denizens of the heavenly planets. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 8:16, it is said, by the Lord that even in the topmost planet of the universe, namely the Brahmaloka, where the duration of life is multiplied by millions of years by earth calculation, one cannot satisfy his hunger. Such hunger can be satisfied only when the living being is situated in immortality, which is attained in the spiritual sky, far, far above the Brahmaloka, in the association of Lord Mukunda, the Lord who awards his devotees the transcendental pleasure of liberation. O son of Brigu, Shonika, when the child Parikshit, the great fighter, was in the womb of his mother, Uttara, and was suffering from the burning heat of the Brahmastra thrown by Ashwatthama, he could observe the Supreme Lord coming to him. Death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. A living being, according to his own action, is allowed to enter into the womb of a mother by the vehicle of her father's seed, and thus he develops his desired body. This is the law of birth in specific bodies, according to one's past actions. When he is awake from trance, he feels the inconvenience of being confined within the womb, and thus he wants to come out of it, and sometimes fortunately prays to the Lord for such liberation. Maharaj Parikshit, while in the womb of his mother, was struck by the Brahmastra released by Ashwatthama, and he was feeling the burning heat. But because he was a devotee of the Lord at once appeared himself within the womb by his all-powerful energy, and the child could see that someone else had come to save him. Even in that helpless condition, the child Parikshit endured the unbearable temperature due to his being a great fighter by nature. And for this reason, the word Vira has been used. Text 8. He, the Lord, was only thumb high, but he was all transcendental. He had a very beautiful, blackish, infallible body, and he wore a dress of lightning yellow and a helmet of blazing gold. Thus he was seen by the child. The Lord was enriched with 4 hands, earrings of molten gold, and eyes blood red with fury. As he loitered about, his club constantly encircled him like a shooting star. It is said in the Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, the Supreme Lord Govinda, by his one plenary portion, enters into the halo of the universe and distributes himself as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, not only within the heart of every living being, but also within every atom of the material elements. Thus, the Lord is all-pervading by his inconceivable potency, and thus he entered the womb of Uttara to save his beloved devotee Maharaj Parikshit. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:31, the Lord assured everyone that his devotees are never to be vanquished. No one can kill a devotee of the Lord because he is protected by the Lord, and no one can save a person whom the Lord desires to kill. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he can both save and kill as he likes. He becomes visible to his devotee Maharaj Parikshit, even in that awkward position in the womb of his mother, in a shape just suitable for his vision. The Lord can become bigger than thousands of universes and can become smaller than an atom at the same time. Merciful as he is, he becomes just suitable to the vision of the limited living being. He is unlimited. He is not limited by any measurement of our calculation. He can become bigger than what we can think of, and he can become smaller than what we can conceive. But in all circumstances, he is the same powerful Lord. There is no difference between the thumb-like Vishnu in the womb of Uttara and the full-fledged Narayan in the Vaikuntha Dham, the kingdom of God. He accepts the form of Archa-Vigraha, worshipable deity, just to accept service from his different, incapable devotees. By the mercy of the Archa-Vigraha, the form of the Lord, in material elements, devotees who are in the material world can easily approach the Lord, although he is not conceivable by the material senses. The Archa-Vigraha is therefore an all-spiritual form of the Lord, to be perceived by the material devotees. Such an Archa-Vigraha of the Lord is never to be considered material. There is no difference between matter and spirit for the Lord, although there is a gulf of difference between the two in the case of the conditioned being. For the Lord, there is nothing but spiritual existence, and similarly, there is nothing except spiritual existence for the pure devotee of the Lord in his intimate relation with the Lord. The Lord was thus engaged in vanquishing the radiation of the Brahmastra, just as the sun evaporates a drop of dew. He was observed by the child, who thought about who he was. While thus being observed by the child, the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, the super soul of everyone, and the protector of the righteous, who stretches in all directions, and who is unlimited by time and space, disappeared at once. Child Parikshit was not observing a living being who is limited by time and space. There is a gulf of difference between the Lord and the individual living being. The Lord is mentioned herein as the supreme living being, unlimited by time and space. Every living being is limited by time and space. Even though a living being is qualitatively one with the Lord, quantitatively there is a great difference between the Supreme Soul and the common individual soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, both the living beings and the Supreme Being are said to be all-pervading. Yet there is a difference between these two kinds of all-pervasiveness. A common living being or soul can be all-pervading within his own limited body, but the Supreme living being is all-pervading in all space and all time. A common living being cannot extend its influence over another common living being by its all-pervasiveness, but the Supreme Soul, Personality of Godhead, is unlimitedly able to exert his influence over all places and all times and over all living beings. And because he is all-pervasive, unlimited by time and space, he can appear even within the womb of the mother of child Parikshit. He is mentioned herein as the protector of the righteous. Anyone who is a surrendered soul unto the Supreme is righteous, and he is specifically protected by the Lord in all circumstances. The Lord is the indirect protector of the unrighteous also, for he rectifies their sins through his external potency. The Lord is mentioned herein as one who is dressed in the 10 directions. This means dressed with garments on 10 sides, up and down. He is present everywhere and can appear and disappear at his will from everywhere and anywhere. His disappearance from the sight of the child Parikshit does not mean that he appeared on the spot from any other place. He was present there, and even after his disappearance he was there, although invisible to the eyes of the child. This material covering of the effulgent firmament is also something like a womb of Mother Nature, and we're all put into the womb by the Lord, the Father of all living beings. He is present everywhere, even in this material womb of Mother Durga, and those who are deserving can see the Lord. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu will be exactly like him in prowess to her. Astronomical calculations of stellar influences upon a living being are not suppositions, but are factual, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Every living being is controlled by the laws of nature every minute, just as a citizen is controlled by the influence of the state. The state laws are grossly observed, but the laws of material nature, being subtle to our gross understanding, cannot be experienced grossly. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:9, every action of life produces another reaction, which is binding upon us, and only those who are acting on behalf of the Vishnu are not bound by reactions. Our actions are judged by the higher authorities, the agents of the Lord, and thus we are awarded bodies according to our activities. The law of nature is so subtle that every part of our body is influenced by the respective stars, and a living being obtains his working body to fulfill his terms of imprisonment by manipulation of such astronomical influence. A man's destiny is therefore ascertained by the birth-time constellation of stars, and a factual horoscope is made by a learned astrologer. It is a great science, and misuse of a science does not make it useless. Maharaj Parikshit, or even the personality of Godhead, appear in certain constellations of good stars, and thus the influences exerted upon the body, thus born at an auspicious moment. The most auspicious constellation of stars takes place during the appearance of the Lord in this material world, and it is specifically called Jayanti, a word not abused for any other purposes. Maharaj Parikshit was not only a great Kshatriya emperor, but also a great devotee of the Lord. Thus he cannot take his birth at any inauspicious moment. As a proper place and time is selected to receive a respectable personality, so also to receive such a personality as Maharaj Parikshit, who is especially cared for by the Supreme Lord, a suitable moment is chosen. When all good stars assemble together to exert their influence upon the king, thus he took his birth just to be known as the great hero of Srimad Bhagavatam. This suitable arrangement of astral influences is never a creation of man's will, but it is the arrangement of the superior management of the agency of the Supreme Lord. Of course, the arrangement is made according to the good or bad deeds of the living being. Herein lies the importance of pious acts performed by the living being. Only by pious acts can one be allowed to get good wealth, good education, and beautiful futures. The samskaras of the school of Sanatana Dharma, man's eternal engagement, are highly suitable for creating an atmosphere, for taking advantage of good stellar influences, and therefore Garbhadan Samskar, or the first seedling purificatory process prescribed for the higher castes in the beginning of all pious acts to receive a good, pious, and intelligent class of men in human society. There will be peace and prosperity in the world due to the good and sane population only. There is hell and disturbance only because of the unwanted, insane populace addicted to sex and violence. Text 13. King Yudhishthira, who was very satisfied with the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, had the purificatory process of birth performed. Learned Brahmanas headed by Domya and Kripa recited auspicious hymns. Purport. There is a need for a good and intelligent class of Brahmanas who are expert in performing the purificatory processes prescribed in the system of Varna Ashram Dharma. Unless such purificatory processes are performed, there is no possibility of good population. And in the age of Kali, the population all over the world is of Shudra quality or lower for want of this purificatory process. It is not possible, however, to revive the Vedic process of purification in this age for want of proper facilities and good balance. But there is the Pancharatrika system also recommended for this age. The Pancharatrika system acts on the Shudra class of men, supposedly the population in the Kali Yuga, and it is the prescribed purificatory process suitable to the age and time. Such a purificatory process is allowed only for spiritual upliftment and not for any other purpose. Spiritual upliftment is never conditioned by higher or lower parentage. After the Garbhadan purificatory process, there are certain other samskaras like Siman Pranayana, Sada Bhakshana, etc. during the period of pregnancy and when the child is born. The first purificatory process is called Jata Karma. This was performed duly by Maharaj Yudhishthira with the help of good and learned Brahmanas like Domya, the royal priest, and Kripacharya, who was not only a priest but also a great general. Both these learned and perfect priests, assisted by other good Brahmanas, were employed by Maharaj Yudhishthira to perform the ceremony. Therefore, all the samskaras, purificatory processes, are not mere formalities or social functions only, but they are all for practical purposes and can be successfully performed by expert Brahmanas like Domya and Kripa. Such Brahmanas are not only rare, but also not available in this age, and therefore For the purpose of spiritual upliftment in this fallen age, the Goswamis preferred the purificatory process under Pancharatric formulas to the Vedic rites. Kripacharya is the son of the great Rishi Sardvan and was born in the family of Gautama. The birth is said to be accidental by chance. The birth is said to be accidental. By chance, the great Rishi Sardvan met Janapati, a famous society girl of heaven, and the Rishi Sardvan discharged semen in two parts. By one part immediately a male child, and by the other part a female child were born as twins. The male child was later known as Kripa, and the female child was known as Kripi. Maharaj Shantanu, while engaged in chase in the jungle, picked up the children and brought them to the Brahminical status by the proper purificatory process. Kripacharya later became a great general like Dronacharya, and his sister was married to Dronacharya. Kripacharya later on took part in the Battle of Kurukshetra and joined the party of Duryodhana. Kripacharya helped kill Abhimanyu, the father of Maharaj Parikshit, but he was still held in esteem in the family of the Pandavas due to being a great Brahmana as Dronacharya. When the Pandavas were sent to the forest, after being defeated in the gambling game with Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra entrusted the Pandavas to Kripacharya for guidance. After the end of the battle, Kripacharya again became a member of the royal assembly, and he was called during the birth of Maharaj Parikshit for recitation of auspicious Vedic hymns to make the ceremony successful. Maharaj Yudhishthir, while quitting the palace for this great departure to the Himalayas, entrusted Kripacharya with Maharaj Parikshit as his disciple, and he left home satisfied because of Kripacharya's taking charge of Maharaj Parikshit. The great administrators, kings, and emperors were always under the guidance of learned Brahmanas like Kripacharya, and thus were able to act properly in the discharge of political responsibilities. Upon the birth of a son, the king, who knew how, where, and when charity should be given, gave gold, land, villages, elephants, horses, and good food grains to the Brahmanas. Only the Brahmanas and sannyasis are authorized to accept charity from other souls. In all the different occasions of samskaras, especially during the time of birth, marriage, and death, wealth is distributed to the Brahmanas because the Brahmanas give the highest quality of service in regard to the prime necessity. The charity was substantial in the shape of gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and food grains, with other materials for cooking, complete for foodstuff. The Brahmanas were not therefore poor in the actual sense of the term. On the contrary, because they possessed gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and sufficient grains, they had nothing to earn for themselves. They would simply devote themselves to the well-being of the entire society. The word tirtavit is significant because the king knew well where and when charity has to be given. Charity is never unproductive or blind. In the Shastra, charity was offered to persons who deserved to accept charity by dint of spiritual enlightenment. The so-called Daridra Narayan misconception of the Supreme Lord by unauthorized persons is never to be found in the Shastra as the object of charity. Nor can a wretched poor man receive much munificent charity in the way of horses, elephants, lands, and villages. The conclusion is that the intelligent men or the Brahmanas specifically engaged in the service of the Lord were properly maintained without anxiety for the needs of the body, and the king and other householders gladly looked after their comforts. It is enjoined in the Shastra that as long as a child is joined with mother by the navel pipe, the child is considered to be one body. But as soon as the pipe is cut, the child is separated from the mother. The purificatory process of Jata Karma is performed. The administrative demigods and past forefathers of the family came to see a newly born child, and such an occasion is specifically accepted as a proper time for distributing wealth to the right persons productively for the spiritual advancement of society.
Text 15. The learned Brahmanas, who were very satisfied with the charities of the king, addressed him as the chief amongst the Purus, and informed him that his son was certainly in the line of descent from the Purus. 16. The Brahmana said, the spotless son has been restored by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, in order to oblige you. He was saved when he was doomed to be destroyed by an irresistible supernatural weapon. Purport. The child Parikshit was saved by the all-powerful and all-pervasive Vishnu, Lord Krishna, for two reasons. The first reason is that the child in the womb of his mother was spotless due to his being a pure devotee of the Lord. The second reason is that the child was the only surviving male descendant of Puru, the king, the pious forefather of the virtuous King Yudhishthira. The Lord wants to continue the line of pious kings to rule over the earth as his representatives for the actual progress of a peaceful and prosperous life. After the battle of Kurukshetra, even up to the next generation of Maharaj Yudhishthira was annihilated, and there were none who could generate another son in the great royal family. Maharaj Parikshit, the son of Abhimanyu, was the only surviving heir apparent in the family, and by the irresistible supernatural Brahmastra weapon of Ashwatthama, he was forced to be annihilated. Lord Krishna is described herein as Vishnu, and this is also significant. Lord Krishna, the original personality of Godhead, does the work of protection and annihilation in his capacity of Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the plenary expansion of Lord Krishna. The all-pervasive activities of the Lord are executed by him in his Vishnu feature. Child Parikshit is described here as spotlessly white because he is an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Such unalloyed devotees of the Lord appear on the earth just to execute the mission of the Lord. The Lord desires the conditioned souls hovering in the material creation to be reclaimed, to go back home, back to God. And thus he helps them by preparing the transcendental literatures, like the Vedas, by sending missionaries of saints and sages, and by deputing his representative, the spiritual master. Such transcendental literatures, missionaries, and representatives of the Lord are spotlessly white, because the contamination of the material qualities cannot even touch them. They are always protected by the Lord when they are threatened with annihilation. Such foolish threats are made by the gross materialists. The Brahmastra, which was thrown by Ashwatthama at the child Parikshit, was certainly supernaturally powerful, and nothing of the material world could resist its force of penetration. But the all-powerful Lord, who is present everywhere, within and without, could counteract it by his all-powerful potency, just to save a bona fide servant of the Lord and descendant of another devotee, Maharaj Yudhishthira, who was always obliged by the Lord by his causeless mercy. Text 17. For this reason, this child will be well known in the world as one who is protected by the personality of Godhead. O most fortunate one, there is no doubt that this child will become a first-class devotee and will be qualified with all good qualities. The Lord gives protection. The Lord gives protection to all living beings because he is their supreme leader. The Vedic hymns confirm that the Lord is the supreme person amongst all personalities. The difference between the two living beings is that the one, the personality of Godhead, provides for all other living beings, and by knowing him, one can achieve eternal peace. Such protection is given by his different potencies to different traits of living beings. But as far as his unalloyed devotees are concerned, he gives the protection personally. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit is protected from the very beginning of his appearance in the womb of his mother. And because he is especially given protection by the Lord, the indication must be concluded that the child could be a first-grade devotee of the Lord with all good qualities. There are three grades of devotees, namely the Mahabhagavatam, Madhyamadikari, and the Kanishnadikari. Those who go to the temples of the Lord and offer worshipful respect to the deity without sufficient knowledge in the theological science, and therefore without any respect for the devotees of the Lord, are called materialistic devotees, or Kanishnadikari. The third grade devotees. Secondly, the devotees who have developed a mentality of genuine service to the Lord, and who thus make friendship only with similar devotees, show favor to the neophytes, and avoid the atheists. And they are called the second grade devotees. But those who see everything in the Lord, or everything of the Lord, and also see in everything an eternal relation of the Lord, so that there is nothing within their purview of sight except the Lord, are called the Mahabhagavatas, or the first-grade devotees of the Lord. Such first-grade devotees of the Lord are perfect in all respects. A devotee who may be in any of these categories is automatically qualified by all good qualities. And thus, a Mahabhagavata devotee like Maharaj Parikshit is certainly perfect in all respects. And because Maharaj Parikshit took his birth in the family of Maharaj Yudhishthira, he is addressed herein as the Mahabhagavata, or the greatest of the fortunates. The family in which a Mahabhagavata takes his birth is fortunate because due to the birth of a first-grade devotee, the members of the family, past, present, and future, up to 100 generations, become liberated by the grace of the Lord, out of respect for his beloved devotee. Therefore, the highest benefit is done to one's family simply by becoming an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. Chapter 12, verse 18. The good king Yudhishthira inquired, O great souls, will he become as saintly a king, as pious in his very name, and as famous and glorified in his achievements as others who appeared in this great royal family? The forefathers of King Yudhishthira were all great saintly kings, pious and glorified by their great achievements. They were all saints on the royal throne, and therefore all the members of the state were happy, pious, well-behaved, prosperous, and spiritually enlightened. Under strict guidance of the great souls and spiritual injunctions, such great saintly kings were trained up, and as a result, the kingdom was full of saintly persons and was a happy land of spiritual life. Maharaj Yudhishthira was himself a replica of his ancestors, and he desired that the next king after him become exactly like his great forefathers. He was happy to learn from the learned Brahmanas that by astrological calculations the child would be born a first-grade devotee of the Lord. And more confidentially, he wanted to know whether the child was going to follow in the footsteps of his great forefathers. That is the way of the monarchical state. The reigning king should be a pious, chivalrous devotee of the Lord, and fear personified for the upstarts. He must also leave and heir a parent equally qualified to rule over the innocent citizens. In the modern setup of the democratic states, the people themselves are fallen to the qualities of the Shudras or less, and the government is run by their representative, who is ignorant of the scriptural mode of administrative education. Thus, the whole atmosphere is surcharged with Shudra qualities, manifested by lust and avarice. Such administrators quarrel every day among themselves. The cabinet of ministers changes often due to party and troop selfishness. Everyone wants to exploit the state resources till he dies. No one retires from political life unless forced to do so. How can such low-grade men do good to the people The result is corruption, intrigue, and hypocrisy. They should learn from the Srimad Bhagavatam how ideal the administrators must be before they can be given charge of different forces. Canto 1, chapter 12, verse 19. The learned Brahmana said, O son of Pritha, this child shall be exactly like King Ikshvaku, son of Manu, in maintaining all those who are born. And as for following the Brahminical principles, especially in being true to his promise, he shall be exactly like Ram, the personality of God, the son of Maharaj. Praja means the living being who has taken his birth in the material world. Actually, the living being has no birth and no death, but because of his separation from the service of the Lord and due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is offered a suitable body to satisfy his material desires. In doing so, one becomes conditioned by the laws of material nature, and the material body is changed in terms of its own work. The living entity thus transmigrates from one body to another in 8,400,000 species of life. But due to his being the part and parcel of the Lord, he not only is maintained with all necessaries of life by the Lord, but also is protected by the Lord and his representatives, saintly kings. These saintly kings give protection to all the prajas, or living beings, to live and to fulfill their terms of imprisonment. Maharaj Parikshit was actually an ideal saintly king, because while touring his kingdom, he happened to see that a poor cow was about to be killed by the personified Kali, whom he at once took to task as a murderer. This means that even the animals were given protection by the saintly administrators, not from any sentimental point of view, but because those who have taken their birth in the material world have the right to live. All the saintly kings, beginning from the king of the sun globe down to the king of the earth, are so inclined by the influence of the Vedic literatures. The Vedic literatures are taught in higher planets also, as there is reference in the Bhagavad Gita, 4.1, about the teachings to the sun god Vivasvan by the Lord, and such lessons are transferred by disciplic succession as it was done by the sun god to his son Manu, and from Manu to Maharaj Ikshvaku. There are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma, and the Manu referred to herein is the seventh Manu, who is one of the Prajapatis, those who create progeny. And he is the son of the sun god. He is known as the Vaivasvata Manu. He had 10 sons, and Maharaj Ikshvaku is one of them. Maharaj Ikshvaku also learned Bhakti Yoga as taught in the Bhagavad Gita from his father, Manu, who got it from his father, the sun god. Later on, the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita came down by disciplic succession from Maharaj Ikshvaku, but in course of time, the chain was broken by unscrupulous persons, and therefore it again had to be taught to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So all the Vedic literatures are current from the very beginning of creation of the material world, and thus the Vedic literatures are known as Apaurushaya, not made by man. The Vedic knowledge was spoken by the Lord and first heard by Brahma, the first created living being within the universe. Maharaj Ikshvaku, one of the sons of Vaivasvata Manu. He had 100 sons. He prohibited meat eating. His son Shashara became the next king after his death. Manu. The Manu mentioned in this verse as the father of Ikshvaku is the seventh Manu of the name Vaivasvata Manu, the son of sun god Vivasvan, to whom Lord Krishna instructed the teachings of Bhagavad Gita prior to his teaching them to Arjuna. Mankind is the descendant of Manu. This Vaivasvata Manu had 10 sons named Ikshvaku, Nabhaga, Trishta, Satyati, Narishanta, Nabhaga, Ishta, Karusha, Vrishadra, and Vasuman. The Lord's incarnation, Matsya, the gigantic fish, was invented during the beginning of Vaivasvata Manu's reign. He learned the principles of Bhagavad Gita from his father, Vivasvam, the sun god, and he re-instructed the same to his son, Maharaj Ikshvaku. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga, the sun god instructed devotional service to Manu, and Manu in his turn instructed it to Ikshvaku for the welfare of the whole human society. Next personality, Lord Ram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead incarnated himself as Sri Rama, accepting the sonhood of his pure devotee Maharaj Dasharatha, the king of Ayodhya. Lord Rama descended along with his plenary portions, and all of them appeared as his younger brothers. In the month of Chaitra, one of the 9th day of the glowing moon in the Treta Yuga, the Lord appeared as usual, Ramanavam night, to establish the principles of religion and to annihilate the disturbing elements. When he was just a young boy, he helped the great sage Vishvamitra by killing Subahu and striking Maricha, the she-demon, who was disturbing the sages in their daily discharge of duties. The Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are meant to cooperate for the welfare of the mass of people. The Brahmana sages endeavor to enlighten the people by perfect knowledge. The Kshatriyas are meant for their protection. Lord Ramachandra is the ideal king for maintaining and protecting the highest culture of humanity, known as Brahmanya Dharma. The Lord is specifically the protector of the cows and the Brahmanas, and hence he enhances the prosperity of the world. He rewarded the administrative demigods by effective weapons to conquer demons through the agency of Vishvamitra. He was present in the bow sacrifice of King Janaka, and by breaking the invincible bow of Shiva, he married Sita Devi, daughter of Maharaj Janaka. After his marriage, he accepted exile in the forest for 14 years by the order of his father, Maharaj Dasharatha. To help the administration of the demigods, he killed 14,000 demons. And by the intrigues of the demons, his wife, Sita Devi, was kidnapped by Ravana. He made friendship with Sugriva, who was helped by the Lord to kill Vali, brother of Sugriva. By the help of Lord Ram, Sugriva became the king of the Varanas, a race of gorillas. The Lord built a floating bridge of stones on the Indian Ocean and reached Lanka, the kingdom of Ravana, who had kidnapped Sita. Later on, Ravana was killed by him, and Ravana's brother, Vibhishana, was installed on the throne of Lanka. Vibhishana was one of the brothers of Ravana, a demon, but Lord Ram made him immortal by his blessings. On the expiry of 14 years, after settling the affairs at Lanka, the Lord came back to his kingdom, Ayodhya, by a flower plain. He instructed his brother Shatrughna, to attack Lavnasura, who reigned at Mathura, and the demon was killed. He performed 10 Ashwamedha sacrifices, and later on he disappeared while taking a bath in the Sharayu River. The great epic Ramayana is the history of Lord Rama's activities in the world, and the authoritative Ramayana was written by the great poet Valmiki. Text 20. This child will be a munificent donor of charity and protector of the surrendered, like the famous King Shivi of the Ushina country. And he will expand the name and fame of his family like Bharata, the son of Maharaj Dushyanta. Purport of God. A king becomes famous by his acts of charity, performances of yajnas, protection of the surrendered, etc. A Kshatriya king is proud to give protection to the surrendered souls. This attitude of a king is called Ishvara Bhava, or factual power to give protection in a righteous cause. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructs living beings to surrender unto Him, and He promises all protection. The Lord is all-powerful and true to His word, and therefore He never fails to give protection to His different devotees. The king, being the representative of the Lord, must possess this attitude of giving protection to the surrendered souls at all risk. Maharaj Shivi, the king of Kushinara, was an intimate friend of Maharaj Yayati, who was able to reach the heavenly planets along with Maharaj Shivi. Maharaj Shivi was aware of the heavenly planet where he was to be transferred after his death, and the description of this heavenly planet is given in the Mahabharata, the Parva. Maharaj Shivi was so charitably disposed that he wanted to give over his acquired position in the heavenly kingdom to Yayati, but he did not accept it. Yayati went to the heavenly planet along with great rishis like Ashtaka and others. On inquiry from the rishis, Yayati gave an account of Shivi's pious acts when all of them were on the path to heaven. He has become a member of the assembly of Yamaraj, who has become his worshipful deity. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, the worshipper of the demigods goes to the planet of the demigods. Yanti Deva Pratam Devan, 925. So Maharaj Shivi has become an associate of the great Vaishnava authority Yamaraj on this particular planet. While he was on the earth, he became very famous as a protector of surrendered souls and a donor of charities. The king of heaven once took the shape of a pigeon hunter, bird, eagle, and Agni, the fire god, took the shape of a pigeon. The pigeon, while being chased by the eagle, took shelter on the lap of Maharaj Shivi, and hunter eagle wanted the pigeon back from the king. The king wanted to give it some other meat to eat and requested the bird not to kill the pigeon. The hunter bird refused to accept the king's offer, but it was settled later on that the eagle would accept flesh from the body of the king of the pigeon's equivalent weight. The king began to cut flesh from his body to weigh in the balance equivalent to the weight of the pigeon. But the mystic pigeon always remained heavier. The king then put himself on the balance to equate with the pigeon, and the demigods were pleased with him. The king of heaven and the fire god disclosed their identity, and the king was blessed by them. Devarshi Narada also glorified Maharaj Shivi for his great achievements, specifically in charity and protection. Maharaj Shivi sacrificed his own son for the satisfaction of human beings in his kingdom, and thus child Parikshit was to become a second Shivi in charity and protection. Next personality is Daushanti Bharata. There are many Bharatas in history, of which Bharata, the brother of Lord Ram, Bharata, the son of King Rishabha, and Bharata, the son of Maharaj Dushyanta, are very famous. And all these Bharatas are historically known to the universe. This earth planet is known as Bharata, or Bharatvarsha, due to King Bharata, the son of Rishabha. But according to some, this land is known as Bharat due to the reign of the son of Dushyanta. So far as we are convinced, this land's name Bharatavarsha was established from the reign of Bharata, the son of King Rishabha. Before him, the land was known as Ilavati. But after the coronation of Bharata, the son of Rishabha, this land became famous as Bharatavarsha. But despite all this, Bharata, the son of Maharaj Dushyanta, was not less important. He is the son of the famous beauty Shakuntala. Maharaj Dushyanta fell in love with Shakuntala in the forest, and Bharat was conceived. After that, Maharaj forgot his wife Shakuntala by the curse of Kanva Muni, and the child Bharata was brought up in the forest by his mother. Even in his childhood, he was so powerful challenged the lions and elephants in the forest and would fight with them as little children play with cats and dogs. Because of the boys becoming so strong, more than the so-called modern Tarzan, because Tarzan was like written in 30s or 30s, 40s, like that. 30s, yeah, 1930s. Tarzan became eternally famous. Next 10,000 years. I wrote it. Okay. Because of the boys becoming so strong, more than the so-called modern Tarzan, the rishis in the forest called him Sarvadama, or one who is able to control everyone. The full description of Maharaj Bharata is given in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva. The Pandavas or the Kurus are sometimes addressed as Bharata due to being born in the dynasty of the famous Maharaj Bharata, the son of King Dushyanta.
That's late.
Correct.
It's late. Yeah.
How much is it?
26. We have 4 minutes.
Okay.
For one more.
Verse 21. Amongst great bowmen, this child will be as good as Arjuna. He will be as irresistible as fire and as unsurpassable as the ocean. Purport. In history, there are two Arjunas. One is Kartavirya Arjuna, the king of Haihaya, and the other is the grandfather of the child. Both the Arjunas are famous for their bowmanship, and the child Parikshit is foretold to be equal to both of them, particularly in fighting. A short description of the Pandava Arjuna is given below. Pandava Arjuna, the great hero of the Bhagavad Gita. He is the Kshatriya son of Maharaj Pandu. Queen Kunti Devi could call for any one of the demigods, and thus she called Indra, and Arjuna was born by him. Arjuna is therefore a plenary part of the heavenly king Indra. He was born in the month of Phalguna, February-March, and therefore he is also called Phalguni. When he appeared as the son of Kunti, his future greatness was proclaimed by air message, and all the important personalities from different parts of the universe, such as the demigods, the Gandharvas, the Adityas from the sun globe, the Rudras, the Vasus, the Nagas, the different rishis, sages of importance, and the Apsaras, the society girls of heaven, all attended the ceremony. The Apsaras pleased everyone by their heavenly dances and songs. Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna and the maternal uncle of Arjuna, sent his priest representative Kashyapa to purify Arjuna by all the prescribed samskaras, or reformatory processes. His samskara of being given a name was performed in the presence of the rishis, residents of Shatashringa. He married 4 wives, Draupadi, Subhadra, Chitrangada, and Ulupi, from whom he got 4 sons of the names Shrutakirti, Abhimanyu, Babruvahana, and Iravan, respectively. During his student life, he was entrusted to study under the great professor Dronacharya, along with other Pandavas and the Gurus. But he excelled everyone by his studious intensity, and Dronacharya was especially attracted by his disciplinary affection. Dronacharya accepted him as a first-grade scholar and loved heartily to bestow upon him all the blessings of military science. He was so ardent a student that he used to practice bowmanship even at night, and for all these reasons, Professor Dronacharya was determined to make him the topmost bowman of the world. He passed very brilliantly the examination in piercing the target, and Dronacharya was very pleased. Royal families in Manipur and Tripura are descendants of Arjuna's son, Babruvahana. Arjuna saved Dronacharya from the attack of a crocodile, and the Acharya, being pleased with him, rewarded him with a weapon of the name Ramashira. Maharaj Drupada was inimical toward Dronacharya, and thus, when he attacked the Acharya, Arjuna got him arrested and brought him before Dronacharya. He besieged a city of the name Ahichatra, belonging to Maharaj Drupada, and after taking it over, he gave it to Dronacharya. The confidential treatment of the weapon Ramashira was explained to Arjuna, and Dronacharya was promised by Arjuna that he would use the weapon if necessary when he, Dronacharya, personally became an enemy of Arjuna. By this, the Acharya forecasted the future battle of Kurukshetra, in which Dronacharya was on the opposite side. Maharaj Drupada, although defeated by Arjuna on behalf of his professor Dronacharya, decided to hand over his daughter Draupadi to his young combatant. But he was disappointed when he heard the false news of Arjuna's death in the fire of the Shalak house intrigued by Duryodhana. He therefore arranged for Draupadi's personal selection of a groom who could pierce the eye of a fish hanging on the ceiling. This trick was especially made because only Arjuna could do it, and he was successful in his desire to hand over his equally worthy daughter to Arjuna. Arjuna's brothers were at that time living incognito under agreement with Duryodhana, and Arjuna and his brothers attended the meeting of Draupadi's selection in the dress of Brahmanas. When all the Kshatriya kings assembled saw that the poor Brahmana had been garlanded by Draupadi for her lord, Sri Krishna disclosed his identity to Balaram. He met Ulupi at Haridwar, and he was attracted by a girl belonging to Nagaloka, and thus Iravan was born. Similarly, he met Chitrangada, a daughter of the king of Manipur, and thus Babruvahana was born. Lord Sri Krishna made a plan to help Arjuna to kidnap Subhadra, sister of Sri Krishna, because Baladev was inclined to hand her over to Duryodhana. Yudhishthir also agreed with Sri Krishna, and thus Subhadra was taken by force by Arjuna and then married to him. Subhadra's son is Abhimanyu, the father of Parikshit Maharaj, the posthumous child. Subhadra's son is Abhimanyu, the father of Parikshit Maharaj, the posthumous child. Arjuna satisfied the fire god by setting fire to the Khandava forest, and thus the fire god gave him one weapon. Indra was angry when the fire was set in the Khandava forest, and thus Indra, assisted by all other demigods, began fighting with Arjuna for his great challenge. They were defeated by Arjuna, and Indradev returned to his heavenly kingdom. Arjuna also promised all protection to one Mayasura, and the latter presented him one valuable conch shell, celebrated as the Devadatta. Similarly, he received many other valuable weapons from Indradev when he was satisfied to see his chivalry. When Maharaj Yudhishthira was disappointed in defeating the king of Magadha, Charasanda, it was Arjuna only who gave King Yudhishthira all kinds of assurances, and thus Arjuna, Bhima, and Lord Krishna started for Magadha to kill Charasanda. When he went out to bring all other kings of the world under the subjugation of the Pandavas, as was usual after the coronation of every emperor, he conquered the country named Kalinda and brought in subjugation King Pagadut. Then he traveled through countries like Antagiri, Ulupur, and Morapur, and brought under subjugation all the rulers. Sometimes he underwent severe types of penances, and later on he was rewarded by Indradev. Lord Shiva also wanted to try the strength of Arjuna, and in the form of an aborigine, Lord Shiva met him. There was a great fight between the two, and at last Lord Shiva was satisfied with him and disclosed his identity. Arjuna prayed to the Lord in all humbleness, and the Lord, being pleased with him, presented him the Pashupata weapon. He acquired many other important weapons from different demigods. He received Dandashtra from Yamaraj, Varshastra from Varuna, and Antardhana Ashtra from Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly kingdom. Indra wanted him to come to the heavenly kingdom, the Indraloka planet, beyond the moon planet. In that planet, he was cordially received by their local residents, and he was awarded reception in the heavenly parliament of Indradev. When he met Indradev, who not only presented him with his Vajra weapon, but also taught him the military and musical science as used in the heavenly planet. In one sense, Indra is the real father of Arjuna, and therefore, indirectly, he wanted to entertain Arjuna with the famous society girl of heaven, Urvashi, the celebrated beauty. The society girls of heaven are lusty, and Urvashi was very eager to contact Arjuna, the strongest human being. She met him in his room and expressed her desires, but Arjuna sustained his unimpeachable character by closing his eyes before Urvashi, addressing her as mother of the Kuru dynasty and placing her in the category of his mothers, Kunti, Madri, and Sachidevi, wife of Indradev. Disappointed, Urvashi cursed Arjuna and left. In the heavenly planet, he also met the great celebrated ascetic Lomasa and prayed to him for the protection of Maharaj Yudhishthira. When his inimical cousin Duryodhana was under the clutches of the Gandharvas, he wanted to save him and requested the Gandharvas to release Duryodhana. But the Gandharvas refused, and thus he fought with them and got Duryodhana released. When all the Pandavas lived incognito, he presented himself in the court of King Virata as a eunuch and was employed as the musical teacher of Uttara, his future daughter-in-law, and was known in the Virata court as the Prihanala. As Prihanala, he fought on behalf of Uttara, the son of King Virata, and thus defeated the Kurus in the fight incognito. His secret weapons were safely kept in the custody of the Somi tree, and he ordered Uttara to get them back. His identity and his brother's identity were later on disclosed to Uttara. Dronacharya was informed of Arjuna's presence in the fight of the Kurus and the Viratas. Later, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna killed many great generals like Karna and others. After the battle of Kurukshetra, he punished Ashvatham, who had killed all the 5 sons of Draupadi. Then all the brothers went to Bhishmadev. Oh, purport. Oh, purport.
Very long.
Almost there.
Nearly, yeah.
Okay. It is due to Arjuna only that the great philosophical discourses of the Bhagavad Gita were again spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. These wonderful acts on the battlefield of Kurukshetra are vividly described in the Mahabharata. Arjuna was defeated, however, by his son Pabruvahana at Manipur and fell unconscious when Lupi saved him. After the disappearance of Lord Krishna, the message was brought by Arjuna to Maharaj Yudhishthira. Again, Arjuna visited Dwaraka. He performed his funeral ceremony in the absence of Krishna. While Arjuna was taking all the wives of Krishna to Indraprastha, he was attacked on the way, and he could not protect the ladies in his custody. At last, advised by Vyasadeva, all the brothers headed for Mahaprasthan. On the way, at the request of his brother, he gave up all important weapons as useless, and he dropped them all in the water. So dramatic. You feel the drama. Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Maharaj Parikshit ki Jai. Arjuna ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.